Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today we're looking at a single heavily guarded ditch in the Egyptian desert that literally dictates the price of everything you buy. I mean, we rarely think about the physical pathways that keep our modern lives running, right? But there's this one specific, narrow, artificial waterway that serves as the absolute jugular vein of global civilization. And, to understand just how fragile our global economy really is, we have to start by looking at a number that completely shocked the world.
$400 million. Let that sink in. Back in March 2021, when a ship longer than the Empire State Building, the Ever Given, wedged itself sideways in the sand for 6 days, it cost the global economy that staggering amount every single hour. I know, it sounds like a freak comedy of errors, right? A giant boat essentially getting stuck in the mud, but the reality was an absolute international panic. Factory assembly lines in Asia just ground to a halt, oil prices surged instantly, and grocery stores in Europe suddenly faced real shortages.
And that whole fiasco brilliantly illustrates why a single gust of wind caused such a massive global traffic jam, one that you could actually see from outer space. Just look at these numbers. The Suez Canal isn't just some convenient shortcut. It handles roughly 12% of total global trade, a massive 30% of the world's shipping container traffic, and over 10% of global maritime oil. If this 120-mile strip of water closes permanently, the global economy doesn't just slow down, it flat out breaks. Your phone becomes twice as expensive, food supplies dwindle, it's that serious.
So it begs the question, why does a desert ditch hold this much power over your daily life? And honestly, why is a waterway built way back in the 19th century actually becoming more dangerous and more critical today than ever before? Well, to answer that, we need to completely shift our perspective. We're going to pull back the curtain on how goods actually move around our planet and understand the fundamental logic of global shipping.
Section 1. The Geography of Speed. Time equals money.
Let's look at the planet through the eyes of a corporate logistics manager for a second. Say you're shipping 20,000 steel containers of electronics from Asia to Europe. In the logistics world, there's really only one metric that matters. Time equals money. Distance is just a math problem, and the sheer scale of the detour we're talking about here is just staggering. Route A, straight through the Suez Canal, is a direct 10,000-mile shot. Takes about 21 days. But without the canal, bypassing the Red Sea and traveling completely around the African continent adds up to 14 extra days at sea. Now, 2 extra weeks might not sound entirely fatal on the surface, but let's break down what those 14 days actually cost.
Get this, a single massive container ship burns roughly 100 to 150 tons of fuel every single day. So extending a voyage by 2 weeks, that adds hundreds of thousands of dollars in extra fuel costs alone just for one ship. Plus, it ties up millions of dollars of corporate inventory floating out on the ocean, and it forces shipping companies to use more vessels just to deliver the exact same amount of goods. When you multiply these massive extra expenses by the nearly 20,000 ships that pass through the canal every year, it becomes immediately clear why this route is a multi-billion-dollar shortcut.
Section 2. A History of Conflict. The Geopolitical Prize.
Because this canal effectively shrunk the distance between East and West overnight. When it opened in 1869, it instantly became arguably the most valuable piece of real estate on Earth. I mean, nations have spent the last 150 years fighting to control it. It was dug by Egyptian forced labor, but initially owned by French and British investors as a vital imperial lifeline. Fast forward in 1956, Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalized the canal. This triggered the Suez Crisis, drawing in Britain, France, and Israel in a coordinated invasion that actually nearly sparked a global conflict before the US stepped in. Then, during the 1967 Six-Day War, the canal was shut down completely. It actually trapped 15 international cargo ships inside for 8 whole years. They were known as the Yellow Fleet, because desert sand completely covered them over time. And during those 8 years, the world learned a really brutal lesson about how geopolitical instability absolutely tanks global trade efficiency and drives up inflation.
Section 3. The Modern Vulnerability. The Megaship Era.
Now, you might assume that in the 21st century, with all our incredible technological advancements, we've outgrown this vulnerability, right? Actually, scratch that. Thanks to what's called just-in-time logistics, we are more dependent on the Suez Canal today than at any point in human history. Modern corporations simply don't keep massive warehouses full of spare parts anymore. It's just way too expensive. Instead, your local supermarket, the nearest car factory, or your favorite electronics store relies on a constant, unbroken stream of arriving ships. The floating cargo ship literally is the warehouse. If that stream is interrupted for even a few days, the entire system just begins to unravel. And to maximize profits within this super-tight system, maritime companies built absolute monsters. Today's megaships are capable of carrying up to 24,000 metal containers. But remember, they are navigating a lockless, sea-level ditch dug straight through the sand. These ships are so wide and they displace so much water that hydrodynamic forces, which is essentially the water pressure acting like a giant vacuum, can physically suck them right into the muddy banks if they get even slightly off-center. These are absolute marvels of engineering, but they are operating with literally zero margin for error.
Section 4. The Bab el-Mandeb Threat. Geopolitics returns.
Incredibly, the sheer physical size of these ships and the threat of accidents aren't even the biggest problem anymore. The canal is really only as useful as the approach leading up to it. Enter the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. To get to the canal from Asia, ships have to navigate this narrow throat of water right off the coast of Yemen, and recent geopolitical conflicts have demonstrated a terrifying new reality. Non-state actors can use cheap, thousands-dollar drones and anti-ship missiles to effectively shut down access to this multi-billion-dollar choke point. When regional conflicts flare up in this specific strait, shipping lines routinely decide that the risk simply isn't worth it. They are forced to abandon the shortcut entirely just out of fear for their crews.
And when ships do abandon the Red Sea to take that costly 5,000-mile detour around Africa, the cascading economic effects are severe and they are immediate. Global shipping rates can literally double overnight. Because ships are sailing thousands of extra miles and burning all that extra fuel, maritime carbon emissions severely spike. And ultimately, global inflation climbs, and all of these extra costs hit everyone's wallets directly, right at the checkout counter.
Section 5. The indispensable ditch. Why alternatives fail.
So even with these glaring vulnerabilities, both physical and geopolitical, we are basically stuck with this single route. Tech moguls and nations absolutely love to promote new ideas to bypass the canal. Russia points to the melting Arctic Sea route, and others pitch these massive transcontinental rail networks cutting across Asia. But look at the alternatives. A railway can only carry an absolute fraction of what a single megaship holds. It just cannot scale to global demand. And the Arctic route? It remains frozen, hazardous, and wildly unpredictable for much of the year. The math always wins. For the foreseeable future, there is simply no replacing the Suez Canal.
Which brings us right back to your everyday life. The next time you buy a piece of clothing, unbox a new smartphone, or fill up your gas tank, realize that its entire journey likely hinged on this heavily guarded 120-mile strip cut through the sands of Egypt. Without this tiny thread connecting Africa, Asia, and Europe, our hyper-connected, fast-paced modern world wouldn't just slow down, it would grind to a sudden, very painful halt.
We live in a world balanced on a knife's edge, you know? We're entirely dependent on geographic shortcuts that we rarely even think about until they fail. So I want you to think about the hidden forces shaping our global economy. Hit subscribe and let me know down in the comments, which critical global choke point should we investigate in our next explainer? Thanks so much for learning with me today.